What's up, YouTube? I'm Robert, and you're watching the B1KER Bar Podcast. So I know you've been occupied a lot lately with some production stuff. You want to talk about that?
Oh yeah. So
you guys already are not thinking the production stuff that he's about to get into.
Oh my gosh, it's such a rabbit hole. So you can't quite see it because it's a little dark, but right there, that is a 3D printer that I recently purchased, and the idea is that I always have these ideas for camera mount positions, but it's always so hard to get the stock GoPro arms to work well because you have to like really crank them down. And if you use too many adapters, like then it just wobbles all over the place. And I was just like, 3D printers are getting so cheap now. I'm pretty mechanically inclined. I bet I can figure this out. And long story short, within the span of like 2 months now, I've been teaching myself AutoCAD CAD. I'm using Fusion 360. I'm learning all this different material science, trying to figure out what's the best material, trying to figure out what's the best configuration for stuff. And I mean, Robert has seen my prototypes. Like there are just rabbit holes that I've fallen down, trying to solve problems, engineering myself into a new problem. And like,
so would it be wrong to talk about like what part you're trying to engineer, or you want to keep that under the wraps?
Well, I mean, it's basically just a GoPro mount.
All right.
Like it's a GoPro mount with modular arms that interlock together. So like they actually have indexing. So like when you lock them in place, they stay in place.
So every time that Joseph has his final design, as soon as he's posting pictures of it, he's like, yeah, but there's some modifications that I need to make. So I'm already working on something else. I don't think it's ever going to finish.
Brian has often said, that famous quote of perfection is the enemy of good.
Yeah.
And I'm not even to good yet because every time I think I get to good, I find this massive flaw with it because I'll 3D print a test print. I'll look at it and be like, yeah, this feels really strong. It's really good. And then I'll put it into configuration. I'm like, oh, but it doesn't work if you do that.
Yeah.
Or I think it's really awesome. And then I print it off and I mount it on my bike and I take it for a ride and it just cracks and falls off. And I'm like, well, I need to redesign it or I need to find a better material. And so, on my channel, since I focus on budget stuff, I get so many comments of like, why are bikes so expensive? This is 10 cents in materials. It shouldn't cost that much. Well, on my computer, when I throw something into what's called the slicer, where it takes a 3D model and then it figures out how it's going to print it, I can tell it how much my filament costs, and it can figure out how much filament it's going to use and how much that's going to cost me in filament. And it'll be like 15 cents for an arm. And like, oh, well, you should only charge $1. Okay, like now let's talk about all the time that I put into this. Let's talk about all the parts that broke. I've probably gone through like $50 worth of filament alone, just beta testing this. I'd rip through that stuff with this printer. And then if I decide to sell it, I have to find a manufacturer, work with an actual engineer to figure out how to do injection molding. Then I got to quality control test that. So I have to have someone testing it. Then I got to worry about warranties. Then I got to figure out how to stock it. Then I got to figure out how to ship it. Then I have to figure out a storefront. Then I have to figure out making sure that I have an LLC so that way I don't get sued and they come after all my money in my retirement funds.
So you guys remember earlier when I was talking about how Joseph, that's one of those Joseph comments when he was worried about somebody hitting him on a road bike. This is exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I said to him when he was telling me, he was saying something like this on our Slack channel. And I was like, dude, just put it on Etsy and print one at a time when somebody wants one and find out if they actually want them. And if somebody hits you up because they broke theirs, then you can decide what you're going to do. But that's not the way that Joseph's brain works.
No, I got to go through the whole process. Like I said, that's why my boss likes me, because I get asked the question. I go, all right, this, then this, then this, then this. If that, then like, anyways, but like, Aaron from PNW Components, he and I talk in the background a lot. He's a good friend of the channel. not a sponsor, just a good friend.
Yeah.
And like I sent him these texts and I'm like, how does anyone make anything? Because this is so like infuriating, the whole process. And then I like go through that spiel of like this.
Yeah.
And he's like, yep, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. And then everyone complains about how expensive it is. And I was like, yeah. And then you got these freaking YouTubers asking for free samples and then they make videos on it.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, that too.
Yeah, and then there's that.
So, I mean, it like basically what that means is yes, 10 cents of material, but then there's so many people and steps in between. That's how 10 cents of material turns into a $20 part.
If you like that, make sure you check out the full episode. And hey, do me a favor, before you take off, hit the like and subscribe.